assigned by a head of agency. That's what you have to do. You have to turn courier. You have to walk, and you have to walk with the letter, and then you have to go in front of a person, get it off their desk, and walk it to the next desk. It's really ridiculous, and it happens at every single stop along the way. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we had an ambassador here that highlighted the number of agencies, the steps he had to go through to get his driver's license.
Yes.
And I think it was 17 different steps.
Yeah.
This situation of paying in one place and taking the receipt to another place, and this backing and forthing, it is unproductive and it is costing us. And that is why we have a black market,
Absolutely
because
so.
We are setting up ourselves to circumvent the system.
Absolutely. Out of time. Thank you very much, Metri. All the best to you, and we'll talk again. PSOJ President there, Metri Siaga, talking about bureaucracy. You can describe bureaucracy in one word: stultifying. That's the effect it has on business and economic activity. Anika Lewis is ready to give you the news at 7.
From Kingston, Jamaica, this is CVM News at noon for Thursday, March 27, 2025. I'm Nika Lewis. Thank you so much for having joined us. We begin with crime. Murders in St. James have plummeted by 63.9% since the start of the year when compared to the same period in 2024. Commanding Officer Senior Superintendent Aaron Samuels credits his team's crime-fighting strategies and vows to keep the momentum going.
We have 26 less murders compared to last year. We have 13 murders since the start of the year, most of which have been domestic or interpersonal in nature. We are happy with the work being done so far as it relates to operation and as it relates also to crime, as we are seeing where quite a bit of these murders have been cleared, and the crime the crime that is taking place in the division is not one that, we are seeing a lot of gang activities surrounding.
Meanwhile, President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, PSOJ, Metri Siaga, seized the opportunity during an interview on CVM's Lead Story to urge newly appointed Senator Audrey Marks to collaborate closely with the PSOJ in addressing the pressing issue of bureaucracy. Siaga raised this concern while discussing the recently concluded 2025-2026 budget presentation.
It absolutely is. Sometimes we're looking for the answer in this grandiose plan, and the grandiose plan has been developed. Things like the Special Economic Zone Authority has spent years developing a very concretized plan to get investors to Jamaica. It is a world-class regime that we have developed here in Jamaica. But we can't get the people in because of the bureaucracy, the red tape. Investments are being held up every day, investments by private sector. And more importantly, you may be surprised to know, investments by public sector.
Yes.
When one agency is trying to get something from another agency and can't get it, and they belong to the same government.
Yes.
What do you expect? What do you expect of the private sector? How can we make it happen? When building approvals and other approvals for, you name it, you just name it, and I will give you 10 cases of companies within my organization that have issues every single day. It is the only key right now that is going to unlock the growth that we need, because it's out there. I mean, if you sit at a table of business people, just sit around a table of 20 business people, and you will hear of 60 different investments that are currently being held up because of government bureaucracy and red tape. And I use this opportunity to publicly say to Audrey Marks, listen, you have a very important job to do. I am here, the PSOJ is here to help you to make it a reality.
Yeah.
But you can't do it alone, and we certainly have not been able to do it.
State Minister for Tourism, Senator Delano Seavright, is commending the work of the sector under the government's Tourism Linkages Network. He says the industry is growing and has been reaping great rewards for the country.
Since 2016, the Tourism Enhancement Fund Speed Networking Initiative, for example, has injected over $1 billion into the local economy, Jamaican dollars, and that's specific to micro and small businesses. Of course, we have an agri-linkages exchange where we connect 2,000 small farmers with tourism stakeholders. And last year alone, I believe on that platform, we sold 4.35 million kilograms of produce, bringing in earnings of 450 million Jamaican dollars. And that's for small farmers. And that's something that we should, talk about. Beyond that, we have an amazing partnership with the Exim Bank. And last year alone, 300 plus small and medium tourism enterprises received loans of 1.93 billion with a B Jamaican dollars.
The sector is also boasting new flights to Jamaica from Dubai via Emirates Airlines starting on April 10. The announcement was welcomed this morning by Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett, who says this is a major achievement for Jamaica's tourism sector and the result of years of advocacy and strategic discussions. The new flight service will operate weekly on Wednesdays, and it is expected to further diversify Jamaica's visitor base while enhancing trade and cultural exchanges. Following this announcement, however, the opposition has responded, claiming that the minister has misled the country. Opposition spokesperson on tourism and linkages, Janice Allen, has called for the minister to come clean.
The minister claimed that Emirates will begin flights to Jamaica. But let me be clear, this is simply not true. What actually happened is that Condor, a German airline, announced a new route to Jamaica. Now, Condor, no stranger to Jamaica, does have a strategic alliance with Emirates, but that does not mean Emirates is flying here. To suggest otherwise is misleading and disingenuous. Jamaica's tourism industry is too important for false claims and political spin. Our tourism workers, businesses, and stakeholders deserve honesty about airlift and investment. The minister must come clean and correct the record. Jamaica is a world-class destination, and we must protect our credibility on the global stage.
Well, the Overseas Examination Council, the OEC, is pushing for greater digital learning and online testing in schools, donating over 5,000 desktop computers to more than 100 institutions under its Computers in Secondary Schools project. Marketing and Client Relations Manager Crystal Daly Thompson says this marks the 6th phase of the initiative, with 21 more schools set to benefit.
We are supporting CXC's initiative for e-testing.
Yes.
So, of course,
about that.
Yes, the examination body wanted to have e-testing done in 2025, but of course, that is going to perhaps be a reality in 2026. So we want the schools to be ready. We want students to be sensitized to that kind of administration of exams. In this tranche, we've gone to Haile Selassie High School.
Yeah.
We've been to, even that's a more privileged high school, so to speak, Immaculate Conception. We have gone there, the St. Hugh's High School. And even though some of these schools may seem to be very much, capable of providing the needs that they have. Yes, they do have needs.
Yes.
And so we're contributing to that. And we're looking at it as a holistic thing where all these institutions contribute to the educational environment for Jamaica.
The People's National Party, PNP, is making a case for its own $23 billion spending plan. The opposition says its proposals focused on education, small business support, and social welfare, and those are both affordable and necessary. However, the government has dismissed those figures, calling them unrealistic. Courtney Lewis has the details.
The budget debates are over, but not the argument about how the opposition will fund the plans it has put forward. Yesterday, while closing the debate, Finance Minister Favour Williams priced the opposition's offerings at $48 billion. A day later, the PNP has dismissed that projection, calling it political gimmickry.
So this whole nonsense, I can only call it nonsense, that our proposals are not credible, that our proposals cannot be financed. This idea of a FinSAC, which is just a bogeyman being raised by the Minister of Finance for political purposes, that is all nonsense, not no so.
Instead, the opposition said it would cost taxpayers less than half of what the finance minister projected. At a media briefing on Wednesday, PNP President Mark Golding says the projection is only a small fraction of the government's $1.27 trillion budget.
Through the total for that is $22.6 billion. And if you round that up for conservative purposes, that's $23 billion. It's the aggregate cost of the budget of the measures that we have outlined. And that is out of a budget currently of $1.27 trillion. And therefore, a percentage of only 1.8% of the total budget to do with all these things that we think are important.
Golding says the party would reallocate the government's $360 billion discretionary fund to support their proposals. The opposition spokesperson on finance estimates $1 billion in tax waivers for small businesses, far less than the finance minister's projected $1.4 billion.
Even though you're not paying corporate income tax, when you're in the formal system, you'll be contributing to GCT, you're employing people, your payroll tax. There are a number of other benefits to companies coming into that formal system. And we believe this incentive is important to encourage businesses, MSMEs, to come into the formal system.
The PNP also proposed $18.7 billion. That's $400 per meal to serve over 200,000 students for the school year. And for the goal of 1 degree per household, the phased expenditure is expected to serve 1 in every 4 persons matriculating to tertiary education.
The total annual cost of all first-generation students across the year cohorts, therefore, is approximately $3.9 billion, and not $31 billion has been posited by the minister.
Courtney Lewis for CVM News.
We take a break, but our discussion segment is up next.
For 54 years of serving Jamaican businesses. Our world-class lab testing services ensure the safety of your food and commodities that you take to market. We are positioned as a business enabler, driving business development, competitiveness, trade, and ensuring consumer safety. We have 5 times the capacity to test over other local labs, plus 10 labs with accredited tests and calibration. We set the standard that promotes safety to consumers in a number of industries, including food processing, agriculture, and construction, having tested over 57,000 products on average annually and growing.
Hi, my name is Valton Gooden and I'm the Executive Director of the Bureau Standard. Let us take your products from lab to market.
This is combat racing. Best on best. Kenny versus Fred, fastest men alive. Masai versus Jasmine, the crown is hard to keep. Cole, Josh, Yara, are you lucky or good? Gabby, Sydney, Marlady, champions preside. This is where scores are settled, legends made, a festival of speed, 4 times every year. The race is on. Buy your tickets now.
Welcome back to CVM News at noon. With tension building as a result of President Donald Trump's imposition of a 25% tariff on countries purchasing oil from Venezuela, what does this mean for Jamaica? What does it? And will we be affected by this? And if so, what are those implications? Joining us to discuss these and other related matters is development economist Mr. Sondre Roden. Welcome, Sondre.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is a developing story, of course, but what are the proposed tariffs on Venezuelan oil? and why have they been imposed, do you believe?
Well, the proposed tariffs are about 25%. That could lead to an increased cost for those who import Venezuelan oil, potentially causing a ripple effect on global oil prices, which we've constantly seen. So also people would have had a conversation publicly and privately about the impacts of tariffs, particularly under the Trump administration. The impacts of tariffs, we know they can be, in many instances, very bad based on how far these tariffs go. The soft power war that we're seeing happening, where we have a trade war. We had a trade war in Trump's first term with Trump versus China, but now, as it relates to the Venezuelan regime, there are some questions around the regime, not being able to have elections that the world external to Venezuela certify as free and fair elections, have been causing some issues. And in 2023, as of 2023, as a matter of fact, the EIA, which is the energy report from the United States of America, there's an approximation that Venezuela holds the largest proven crude oil reserves. They estimated about 303 billion barrels, and that is about 17% of global reserves.
It's a good place for us to take a quick pause because we're up on a break, and then we'll continue the conversation right after.
Not a problem.
The Time is brought to you by Ford Territory.
Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with development economist Mr. Sondre Roden on what's happened with tariffs imposed on countries importing Venezuelan oil. Sondre, you were telling us a little bit of history about what happened in that report from the Americas regarding Venezuelan oil control and supremacy of sorts in some areas in the West. What exactly are we looking at?
Right, so about 17% of global reserves, Venezuela has that. That's based on the U.S. report, EIA report, yeah. So despite the fact that the reserves are so vast, this production that they've seen in Venezuela, it has declined from about 3.2 million barrels per day in 2000 to 735,000 as at September 2023. So there was a decrease, but what we saw in that was that there was an impact on global oil prices. And we note all of these prices and figures to say that the impact is really a political impact, international political impact, because of the issues that we'd have noted that would have happened under the Maduro regime. And, they were trying to install Guaido as a alternative and have another election, but Maduro would not have it, and he's still the leader of Venezuela even now, even after holding another election. Then of course the world and election observers are saying they don't believe the elections were free and fair. So that is what we are faced with, and the impacts are far and wide, especially on supply chain, and that's a problem that we possibly would face as Jamaica, because Jamaica does not, at this moment, we don't import any oil from Venezuela, so therefore we won't have we won't feel the direct impact.
But there was a time when we did. So what happened with the Petrocaribe deal?
Well, I think it's out there in the media for everybody to see. The government of the day had some issues, and then there were geopolitical issues as well as it relates to the OAS and the decision we took in the OAS. And we decided as a nation, or as a government, and the leaders decided that, hey, we are going to have to sever ties with Venezuela based on the deal. And a part of the argument that we got in the public domain was that the Petrocaribe and what we agreed to was not being fulfilled because we haven't had new machinery, haven't had real development of the space here in Jamaica.
But what about other Caribbean countries? Do we have Caribbean countries still importing oil from Venezuela?
Yes, we still have Caribbean countries importing oil from Venezuela, and that might be the indirect impact, because we have to consider those trade ties as well, and what happens across the region can affect us, because what would happen, it's not just Caribbean, think about Latin America as well, because of the positioning of Latin America and the Caribbean. Oil prices globally, as we know, are very sensitive. So tariffs may tighten supply, which can cause higher, for shipping, for electricity costs, and those things can then reflect on you, the common man, as it relates to probably your light bill. We don't know just yet how we'll feel that impact. So we have to balance those relations really with the United States and Latin